I need a pointer there.
We will get started here. We do have Jessica from Northland here. I presume you're not here to talk about the street capital improvement plan?
I would be happy to participate.
So we'll move up the Lewis Industries tax abatement to number 1, and that way, unless you want to stick around for everything, you take off.
Okay, shall we begin?
Let's begin. Let's talk about Lewis.
Here we go. There are a couple of slides in the packet. If you go to slide number 2, I just made it in easier language instead of a bunch of numbers, just highlighting the plots that we're talking about. These are all the Lewis Industries properties, even though they have different names. But if we look at the next slide, which is slide number 3, you'll see the current property taxes that they're paying on these. Interesting to note that the total property tax is around $86,000 for this year. $13,788 is for City of Painesville. And if you look at the percentage allocation, you'll notice that 13% of the main property is coming to us. And I think maybe Jessica, you can explain more on this. But I think it's due to the current TIF, and that's why it's showing up as a lower amount. Now what we want to talk about is the current proposal they have for abatement, and I'll let Jessica go through the slide number 4.
All right, thanks, Tarek. Okay.
Jennifer, you got another packet?
Before moving on to slide 4, I will just reiterate what Tarek just mentioned, is that a bulk of the taxes are being captured within the existing TIF district. So that's why you're seeing that very small percentage going to the city currently. Once that TIF district expires off or is decertified, the city's portion of taxes would increase. So going on to slide 4, so I'm just first going to say a couple of words about tax abatement. The city has approved tax abatement in the past for other projects, but to give you just a very quick summary of tax abatement in Minnesota, being that it operates a little bit differently here than it does in other states. Oftentimes when people think of abatement, they think of the reduction or the elimination of taxes, and that's actually not how it occurs here in Minnesota. The approval of abatement is really providing the authority to levy an abatement tax. So that abatement levy is spread amongst all of the taxable parcels here in the city, just like your general levy, just like your debt service levy. But that being said, when new development is occurring, you are anticipating the increase in overall property taxes would essentially offset that abatement levy. So you'd be looking at a net neutral position, or at least a position where you're not putting pressure on your tax rate. So just something to kind of keep in the back of your mind as we look through some of these numbers. So you've got sort of a snapshot here of some analysis that we've done based on the application that was submitted by Lewis Industries for abatement support for a new expansion project. So it should be noted that when Lewis Industries originally approached the city, they were looking for either to expand the existing TIF District 114 or to begin a new TIF district. And for a variety of reasons, that is just not an option currently. And we can certainly get into that if council wants to, but for the purposes of just discussing the abatement, I'll just say that there are a number of reasons why that can't happen. So with that, the revised application to the city came forward with a request for abatement. So when we set up our analysis, we modeled this to sort of mimic what an economic development TIF district would look like. So that's why you're seeing 9 total years here. Abatement under state law can go up to 15 years if all of the taxing jurisdictions participate, or if one or more do not, you can go up to 20 years. But that being said, we have limited this so that it mimics a TIF district. So on the very far left, you'll see the year, again, years 1 through 9, and the taxes payable year. This is sort of designed to start in 2023, and that is because the tax value for 2022 has already been set by the county. So they set that on January 2nd of each year for the year following. So that being said, anything that is built upon this year would be recognized as of January 2nd of 2022 for taxes payable in 23. So that's why you're seeing that delay. The taxable market value here is essentially representative of the base value that exists today. So looking at that current taxable market value, plus the assumption of that new development occurring. So we have roughly a 2.2 and some change, 2.2 million or so in terms of what the current tax value is for the Lewis Industry parcel that is currently within that TIF district. And based on the costs that were submitted by Lewis Industries, and we presented that to the county assessor's office, they came back and said, this is what you can reasonably expect to happen to the taxable market value. So what we're starting with is a taxable market value of 3.705200 in taxable market value. And what that translates to in terms of tax capacity is 74,104. And you'll see that those numbers increase over the life of this abatement period. The reason for that is because we've assumed that the property would appreciate by about 1% per year. Now that is going to change, of course. We've made some assumptions here, but when we've looked at the way the property has appreciated in the past, it's kind of gone between 2%, 0.5% a year. So we settled at 1%, and that's why you're seeing those numbers increase. Does anyone want me to go into the difference between taxable market value and tax capacity? Okay, so the resulting tax capacity here is 74,104, and that increases over time. And then from there, we take out that base tax capacity value, because the request is not for the council to consider abating the base value, the value that exists today. The request is to consider abatement to support the expansion project. And so once we take out that base tax capacity, we're left with the captured tax capacity, which starts at around $28,700 per year. And from there, we take the city's tax rate, and that provides us with the city's portion of taxes, essentially the amount of taxes that the city could expect to receive generated from that expansion should no abatement be provided. So once we take that number, that 12,848, and again, that grows over time, we've assumed that the city would retain 10% for administrative costs. And the reason that we did that again is because we're trying to mimic a TIF district here. And while the city will not have the reporting requirements associated with the TIF district, it is likely that staff would still have to spend some time monitoring the abatement, calculating the abatement every year, making sure the taxes were paid, et cetera. So there would be some staff time, and that's why we're proposing here that 10% would be retained by the city. And what that means is that 90% of that new portion of taxes would be available to provide back to the property owner. And over the life here, what we have assumed based on, again, the assumption that the taxable market value would increase based on what we heard from the assessor's office, and that the appreciation would occur at 1% per year, is that the city's portion of taxes that could be rebated back to the property owner would be about $115,000. And then going over, you're going to see the county's portion of taxes and the school district's portion of taxes. And the reason that those are different is because the county's tax rate is going to be different than the city's, and same thing with the school. The school's tax rate is quite a bit lower than the county and the city. So that's sort of our spiel in terms of how we came to these numbers. Certainly, as I said, the city can choose to do more than this. You can go up to 15 years. Our understanding is that the school district has agreed to provide some form of abatement, and that the county has as well. But what we understand is that the county is waiting to kind of see what the city's position is on providing abatement before they take any action. Are there any questions about kind of how we arrived at these numbers or the assumptions that we've used?
Okay.
Turn it back to you.
All right. Just one thing on slide 4 before we go to slide 5 is I added up the total here, and what Lewis Industries is asking for in terms of abatement is roughly or close to $300,000 over the life of the abatement from all three entities. And all three entities, again, can choose how much they want to participate, but Lewis Industries is asking for it all, which is the increase of the new amount. So going to slide 5, we did some, and I thank Jessica for this again, because we did some projections based on a couple of scenarios. I don't want to spend too much time here. I just want to explain to you that we did 3 different scenarios. The first scenario was to give Lewis Industries what they're requesting, which is all of the abatement for 9 years. The second scenario, we're assuming that we will give them abatement on the full amount for year 1, and then we go declining every year until it runs off on year 9. The third scenario, we thought, okay, we'll kind of mix a little bit of both. For the first 3 years, we'll be generous, we'll give them all of what they're asking, and then we'll decline from there. Once we get to half or 50%, we'll continue until the abatement ends. So what I want you to focus on is slide 6, is if we graph it out so you can see, this is from Lewis Industries' perspective. This is the benefit that they're receiving. So if we were to give them everything, as you can see, they're getting a total amount of $115,000 in abated taxes from the city over 9 years. If we were to adjust it, meaning that the city would retain some portion of it, you can see how they have a benefit initially and it declines over time. The last slide is, I guess, really the final summary of this all is, and where we can have our discussion is, should we give Lewis Industries the full amount that they're asking for? The net benefit to the city, or the net benefit in terms of tax revenues to the city are 0 for this new portion for 9 years, meaning that we're not getting any new tax revenue from Lewis Industries for 9 years. However, if we choose to stagger it or give them, I guess, a scaling amount over time, the city would see an increase in revenue and not have to wait until after 9 years to see a bounce in revenue from this. That's where I'll end with that, and then I'll give it to Jessica one more time here.
Sure. So something for the council to consider, if you could go back to, it's slide 5, where we've got those 3 separate scenarios. So again, the request is for the 115 in total. But what Tarek put together in terms of scenario 2 and 3 and sort of this phasing out approach, with scenario 2, we've got $67,185 in total being provided back to Lewis Industries, and then scenario 3 being that 88. Maybe I need glasses now.
Yeah, I know. I could make it bigger.
88,103. Something for the council to consider is if you do choose to go with scenario 2 or 3, even though we've modeled this out over 9 years, you may choose to do this over a shorter period of time. So if the council said, you know what, we're comfortable with scenario 2 and we're going to give them $67,000. If that's the case, you may want to consider tightening this up, going only 6 years and giving them that $67,000 over 6 years rather than phasing it out. Just give them that amount that they're paying each year so that you can be done with it and not have to deal with sort of the housekeeping of records, making sure that the taxes are paid, and then that full value is realized sooner. So there's a number of ways that you can slice and dice that, but that's just sort of food for thought as council considers whether or not they want to assist the project.
So concluding words would be that instead of going the route of choosing a declining scale, we can just summarize and say, well, they're asking for 115, we can give them X amount, and we can choose how to give them X amount. We can give them all up front, we can equal amount over a certain number of years, but we can choosing, or I think what Jessica was maybe clarified to me too, but if we choose to give them a fixed amount, that's easier than having a percentage every year and then having the administrative costs associated with it. Okay.
And I think the idea is that abatement is a flexible tool. You can kind of fashion it the way that you're comfortable with. It's more flexible than a TIF from the city's perspective. You can be more creative with it if you want to.
Yeah, and when I talked to the school district, they're willing to give them all of the 9 years, the entire amount. When I spoke with the county, they had a meeting on it yesterday, and they decided to table it to wait the outcome of what we choose to decide, and they want to piggyback on what we decide.
So I understood our rate could be completely separate from the school district and the county, but our timeline can be separate as well.
Correct, yes.
The other thing that in tax abatement, you can take part of the abatement to pay for utilities that are going to be required by the project, but from talking, my sense is that there's nothing really that's going to be required. I was a little worried about drainage, but it sounds like there's not going to be an issue.
My biggest concern is, Ron, I'm looking at your capital improvement plan, and I can't tell from the colors if that's a 2029 or a 2031 project over there in the loop. But if we're looking at increased traffic from trucks, from shipping, that could bump this up. That's going to be added road maintenance costs if we're getting an increase in truck traffic over there.
It is 2031?
It is 20, okay.
Yes.
So that'd be when this is over.
But just right at the end.
Yep. Which they'll have assessments then.
Right.
Two things to note, we didn't mention is Lewis Industries will be giving up TIF for the final 2 years.
Correct.
So of course, that's a benefit for the city, and also based on Lewis's plans or stated plans, every 5 to 7 years, they plan on doing some form of expansion. So based on that scenario, before this runs out, if it were 9 years, they would have another expansion plan in the works before that time.
As opposed to us doing a 6-year loan or abatement and then them delaying their project by a year to renew an abatement.
Well, the question would be is if they were to approach us 5, 6, 7 years down the line for another abatement or TIF, would we entertain that or not?
Except that their projects are back on the tax rolls by then, so it's just the new part that becomes part of
Yeah.
the TIF or abatement. And that's how we get new expansions. Well, this is nothing we're voting on tonight, right?
Yeah. Nothing's up for a vote right now. It's just discussion.
I'm in favor of giving them the 100%, but I would be willing to shorten it up a little.
I like the tiered approach, option 3, I guess that is.
I like that too.
That would be my second choice, yeah.
Which was that?
Option 3.
Yep. Would there be at any advantage of allowing us to go 6 years and then revisit in 6 years to see where we're at?
Not, isn't it pretty much set? Once you've done it, that's what it is.
Yeah, so a couple of things that you can do. So we do need to publish a hearing notice so that we can hold that hearing on July 12th. So you could maintain the flexibility by just stating that the not to exceed term would be 9 years, and that the not to exceed amount is 115. It's the abatement or development agreement that limits the way that the city interacts with that property owner. So that could essentially be whittled down to that $88,000 number. It could be, and in that case, if we're basing it on the figures here, the city would be out of it probably in year 7. Now, with abatement, once the abatement ends, you can't tack an abatement on to that abatement. So if you've determined kind of what that's going to look like up front, you can't really amend it. The way that statute reads is that once the abatement runs out for that particular parcel, you can't have another abatement for 8 years after the first one ends, unless there's a new project occurring. So it can't be for the original project that's contemplated. That being said, you do have flexibility, of course. Like I said, we could draft the hearing notice so that you've got flexibility, but once that development agreement is in place, it kind of locks in what that maximum amount and what that maximum term is going to be.
Okay. I have another question. If we were to go with scenario one, what kind of stress would that put on the city budget?
Arguably, it wouldn't change the city budget. It'd be the same as if they didn't do their expansion at all.
Yeah, we're looking at it in terms of new revenue, so there will be no new revenue for the city from that.
Which is about 12,000 a year or 11,000.
Yep.
So
All right.
1.5 in the levy.
Yeah. I don't,
My position is we publish our hearing notice with the maximum of 9 years, 115 as documented in here, and then we can hammer that out at the public hearing. I don't know if that's something we have to vote on next week to get that public hearing set and started.
It's already set.
It is already set, yeah, so publish it as is.
And then after the public hearing is when the discussion and the decision is made on the abatement, right?
Yeah, so you would close it for the public hearing, reopen your council meeting and take action on whichever scenario or alternative.
Or even a scenario we didn't discuss, yeah, will be decided.
So I can start working on a development agreement, but you can't really finish it until a decision is made in terms of where you're going. I mean, we can get a broad outline, but we can't really finish it up.
So tentatively, you would have that public hearing, but the development agreement might come out a meeting later.
I'm fine with that.
other Lewises are fine with that.
I have a question. Are there any other businesses that have this scenario in town?
We had one.
The city has only approved one other tax abatement in the last 21 years. Those people have never submitted their documents to actually get the money.
Right, that never happened.
So it's.
It was
right now
approved but didn't happen.
Yeah.
Right. So it was the first time we'd ever been approached about one.
So no, we don't have any active tax abatements.
I'd like to hear after the public hearing if we get any comment on it. I like that 88 number. So I know Gene suggested going with option 1, but shortening the time. So I don't know if that'd be fine. If you were thinking of getting it closer to that 88 number, 100% for fewer years, I'd be open to something like that. So Bill, I don't know if you can structure a development agreement around that 88 number. That makes it easier for you or harder?
Yeah, I mean, I can start with that idea in mind that that's a scenario that a few people are at least comfortable with. I mean, obviously, we have to have a vote, and it's got to be approved before we can finalize it, but, yeah.
So you're thinking 100% for 6 years? Or, sorry, 7 years?
Yeah.
Something like that. I see Neil shaking his head. Paul, what are your thoughts? Just as a preliminary,
I would rather go with the 88 number because that's in between the high and the low.
Right.
So give and take.
If we can shorten it to 7 years, all the better.
yeah.
That's probably around the time where we'll be doing another expansion.
Well, I just have one question. We, hopefully, in a year or two, we'll have a new industrial park. There is interest in some businesses already. How many of them are gonna ask for abatement or TIF?
Quite a few.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, it doesn't hurt us, but it doesn't help us. That's the only,
Yeah,
Well,
no, we need new revenue, yeah.
yeah, and setting it at 6 or 7 years, then it kind of shows that's what our max is for the next one that wants one. So they can plan accordingly.
And I think this would be setting a good example for others.
So 100% for 7 years by my math is 87,315. Using these numbers.
See how that works.
I think I'm comfortable with that,
Yeah.
at least as the starting point to our discussion next. Okay. Any other questions for Jessica or Tarek on this? Okay. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
We'll go back up to new business on your street projects.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to get this in front of the council before we start budgeting process for this year. As you can see, the downtown project, well, initially it was scheduled for 2021. This year, that got moved back 2 years to 2023, and then I think it was a year or two ago, we moved it back again to 2025. One of the biggest flags down there, or budgeting items, obviously, is going to be the street lights. I remember 30 years ago when we did it, it was talked about, but we just plain old didn't have the revenue at the time. And I guess I want to make sure that does not happen again, that somehow we do need to budget for it, unless if we plan to move the project back again a couple more years. You know, and then beyond that, it's pretty much every other year again for quite a number of years, as far as we have it pushed out. Construction costs obviously have not decreased at all, and they are not going to go down. They've just increased every year. There's no question about it.
Question, Ron, are these basically just streets, or is it sewer and water of some sort?
The downtown is going to be about 70% street and general fund items, because the sanitary sewer was completely done in '90, so we won't have to go back in there. There'll be some water main that needs to be replaced, but the rest is going to be street, curb, and gutter.
And sewer and water? Oh, no, I meant for the other projects too.
And streetlights, which is general fund also.
Right, right.
Downtown sidewalks as well then?
Sidewalks included, yes. Yeah, the plan would be to basically do it from building to building.
Well, it needs it,
Yes, but then it will need it, there's no doubt.
for sure by then.
Yeah.
Not that I want to pay the assessments, but put it off as long as you want. And the rest of the projects on the CIP is streets, or is it sewer?
It's a combination.
Okay,
Yeah, some of them will be complete rehabs. Like the 27 project, that's mostly all rehabs, as is the 29 project. So that's quite a division, but then when you get to the 31 project, that is mostly all overlays.
okay.
And be very little sewer and water in those.
'Cause I figured we did most of the sewer and water by now.
Yes, most of it's done.
It's almost all done.
You know, and by then, you know, some of our bonds will be being paid up, so we'll
Right.
be able to rotate a lot of that monies. So it's just something I wanted to make sure the council's aware of and on board with, so.
Is 2-year realistic, or some of these, maybe we should be doing 3-year interval? Would that,
We can surely look at that.
I'm just thinking that might help our overall budget, and still we're just losing a year instead of 2. Do a 3-year rotation with these projects.
Yeah, no.
Some of the projects may get bigger, so the dollar amounts at the end, you know, will likely be about the same, but it'd give you more time
Budget.
for other bonds to be paid off.
I know we used to always do 2 years, but we've been pushing them out.
Yeah.
So they haven't gotten done in 2 years, so maybe we should just plan for 3.
Initially, when we started, we did them every year.
Yes, I remember.
That was brutal.
I wasn't on the council, but I lived through it. The first one was on my house street. The first one.
I would assume with the huge increase with house values, but that takes a year or 2 to catch up, but eventually we should see some revenue there.
Yes? Well, just something to be aware of as we get into budget.
Okay. Thanks, Ron.
I guess along with that, I have the downtown, or the banners. There was some discussion that, and I've heard a number of people ask, where are the banners? The brackets are in such tough shape that they would have to be replaced before we can put the banners back up. On page 5, there is the brackets themselves for these current poles. The only difference between those two costs is the color. So if you'd want to go again with the silver, it'd be the $4,056, and if you want black, it's $4,264. But again, these brackets will only work on these poles, so when we redo them, these would be no good. So if we want to proceed with them, we surely can get them, and
Well, plus also there's a cost for the new banners as well, right?
if we want new banners, this is the cost, on page 4, is the cost for new banners.
Because some of those banners need replacing. Not all of them, but some of them do.
Correct.
Actually, I think the chamber bought most of those.
The
those
chamber
banners.
back then bought the
Bought the
majority of the
banners.
banners, yes.
I hate to see us not have them for 5 years though. Because, or 4 years, 5.
The winter banners are all in fair shape, I think they would make it, but the summer banners, I think out of the 50, there's probably 30 of them that we could put up right now.
Do you think it would pay off to look for bids on these? To see ones that are gonna be more durable? Because under here, it looks like it's under display sales.
Yes.
Has anyone looked into any other places that might?
We've used several different vendors over the years.
Okay.
So, yeah, I mean, we can go anywhere and get different prices, absolutely, if we want.
Right, because I think that we would be looking for something that's gonna last for a while. You know, just until the next banner or two goes by, where the styles change a little bit here and there. So,
So actually, this second one for the brackets, it's 2 different, just the difference in color. So it's not really $8,000, it's 4,000.
It's 4,000, correct?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And then would there be a design cost, or do we already have them designed?
This is just brackets.
No, I'm talking about on the banners
Banners.
themselves. Yeah.
If we want a standard one that they have, no, but if we want something specific, obviously, then yes. Or if we want the same, I guess I didn't ask them if they still have our design.
Sure.
I don't know.
I'm just wondering if we do have to pay for design, it might be something where we could do a community contest or something like that, get some local folks to design it for us and
Yeah.
save a few $100 that way.
For the art cost. Yeah. Yep.
Now, Ron, you said this would not work once we get new streetlights?
It'd be 4,000 for just the
So-
5 years.
For a couple, 3, 4 years, I don't see that it's a worthwhile investment. Because what is how long have we had the banners?
The banners initially, we came in 1991.
Yeah,
Yes,
20 years,
30 years.
30.
So they've lasted a while.
So,
They've lasted a long time.
yeah, I think we should wait till we have the new street lights and do them.
So put up the existing 30 or however much we can?
Well, except
Are
we
you
still
saying
gotta
we
get
should-
the brackets.
To get the new brackets so we can put up what we have? Or,
Some of them are pretty poor, I know that. I'm saying maybe not put up anything.
yep, that's,
At the end of the day, I'd rather see 11,000 or 10,000 go towards the bathroom facility at Ampey Park, myself.
So Ron, you're saying you've got about 30 of the banners that are still okay. So if you got 30 brackets, you could put up the ones you've got probably. Is that,
that's correct.
yeah, so
And maybe-
more than half, but less than the whole thing.
Maybe just in the downtown area.
We could. Now, if the brackets are about $78 each, so if we only want 30 of them, yes, we could do that.
Less than 2,000. Should be,
I could live with that.
yep.
We still are gonna have brackets that are worthless in 4 years, but
But they might, some get broken anyway between the next 5 years. It's happening.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
On to the mobile home park, and we do have the memo here from Bolton and Mink attached on page 8 of the update. That was also emailed out last week as well. Pretty strong consensus over there that no one can afford anything on top of what they're already paying. Or at least that's what we've been told.
Yeah.
I did have a follow-up call from one more resident who was not at that meeting, and he reiterated what we heard, the same thing.
My feeling is that we drop it, but that we work with the owner to bring it up to better standards.
Yeah, that was something that I was gonna say we could do as well, is go back to the owner, because we've had, or the more we look into it, the more we realize that it's not an economically viable project for us to do, and it's not really a property that we own, so the existing owner ideally would improve it. And I think one of the concerns that I heard in the past is, well, if we decide, or we go back to the current owner and say, we just can't go ahead with this relocation right now, it's not working out for us, he could decide to shut it down and just sell off the land. Or what we could do is, like you said, Gene, is just try to come up with a way to say, hey, look, we want to find a way for you to help improve it through some of the government programs that are available and things like that.
Jennifer, did we ever hear back from the county on whether or not they did a conditional use permit back when it was first incorporated over there?
So when I called the county, left a message for one department, and she referred me to another department, and they have nothing.
Okay.
They were not able to put their arms around a conditional use. And I do not have a conditional use, and potentially, maybe they weren't by conditional use back in the
Back
late
then, yeah.
60s,
Yep.
early 70s.
I think our zoning ordinance for the city was adopted in 1978, as far as I know. There wouldn't have been a zoning ordinance before that I'm aware of anyway. So,
The person that I talk to now, you know, she's the one that follows up on complaints and helps with the licensing and the inspections on licensing, but nothing in the historical side of it.
So after discussing it with many of the residents in town and in the trailer park, this looks like it's a lose-lose situation for everybody. And I think right now, we should table it, and instead of chasing time and money after it, we'll leave it as it is right now. But one thing I think we can pull away from this is, we've got a lot more knowledge of what's out there. In case this comes up again, at least we're gonna be a little bit more prepared for it. Or more prepared than we were to start with.
So what options does that leave for the neighbors that were interested in the property?
They'd have to negotiate a sale with the current owner. And then figure
And
out,
that is an option, I guess.
yep.
Yep, he owns it.
But none of them are diehard interested. They're, if it's available, they'll take it, but they're not aggressively pursuing it.
Right.
That's, I mean, that's my hunch, Ron, right?
No, I think you're correct at this point.
If it's available, they'll take it, but they're not gonna go aggressively after it and say, hey, close down the park and let's take this.
'Cause there would have to be a lot of cleanup there, wouldn't there?
Well, I
Such
guess-
as,
If
Fair
the
amount.
park stays open, I think we need to help them, not financially, but a park, in my opinion, is one step away from being condemned.
I was gonna.
I don't believe it's really good livable conditions.
No.
And that's as much a tragedy as displacing these people, which the mayor said he doesn't want to do, and I agree.
I know
But living in substandard conditions is also a tragedy.
there's one in there that there's no floor. It's just
And-
a piece of carpet over a hole in the floor.
If the current owner can't
Got
get this up to par, and the same way with the shelter and the road, then I think we need to, down the road a year or two, look at closing her down.
well, I think that has happened in town just recently, hasn't there? There's a house that was uninhabitable on Minnesota Street,
Yeah.
and didn't the city condemn it? Okay, so it's either they make it up to code or close to it, or whatever they need to do, otherwise it's just gonna get condemned.
And like the home Gene is talking about, that should be condemned tomorrow.
Yes,
Well, I
I'd
think,
hate to see them people go in another winter with no floor.
Yeah.
That's sad.
Well, I think the whole point to begin with was that we didn't want to leave anybody homeless, and if he decides to sell or their properties are condemned, that's where we are. Where are they gonna go? And I know that, I mean, there's only so much we can do.
Well-
They've expressed that they don't want to go, and they can't afford to go. But I don't like what's happening. I think it's a predatory business practice, and I think we should keep an eye on it, but I don't know what our options are.
We do have housing that's subsidized in this town that is based on your income.
Right?
And this would be a lot better than their current living conditions.
So, you know, we have taken actions on hazardous properties, which, I mean, it's a long-winded discussion about what's a hazardous property, but it has to do with being livable when it's a residential property. And that's the rub is, you know, do you want to do that if the effect is that you're kicking somebody out of the place that they're living? And it's also confusing over there because I don't know sometimes who the owner is, if it's really the tenant or if it's really the landlord that's the owner. It's
Complicated.
It's confusing sometimes, but in terms of a hazardous building, it doesn't matter. I mean, if it's a hazardous building, it's a hazardous building, but you still, in the process, you've got to know, you've got to figure out who the owner is because you have to give them notice. And I'm always concerned about how we figure that out over there.
Sure.
So is our ability to declare a hazardous building, it's not tied then to the real property?
Right. Yeah, it's been a while, but I have looked into this through, you know, the listserv with the League of Minnesota City Attorneys because of a concern about that. And I've been told that it has been used on manufactured homes by other municipalities. So it's doable, but with it's troubling over there just because of, you know, the title of those places isn't very clear. I don't know that we could even get that information from MnDOT, which you should be able to get it from, but I'm not sure that they know at this point who owns what over there. So that's the difficulty in terms of giving notice. That process would be a little touchy, but it theoretically is possible, but it would be difficult.
According to the previous owner, just from what I was able to gather from some of the residents there, is that they could actually take possession of the trailer house if they did improvements on it, basically painting the outsides to make it look livable. And all they would have to do is pay lot rent,
Yeah.
which was, for some people that were down and out, was a good option for them
Yeah.
until they could move up and on and up. But a lot of it's going to depend upon what is their standard of living and what's actually safe. And I think if anything, what the city could do, instead of offering anything financially, is just offer the ideas of where they can go to help them out that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and even, pointing them in the direction of subsidized living situations where their rent would be based on their income would be good. I don't know how often there's an opening in town, but there are other places in the area that have similar facilities, and just that knowledge might help some people. I don't know.
Well, I agree that this is, after meeting with all of the residents, not a feasible project. I don't think there's any disagreement on that. But I do just need to note for the record and say it publicly that I think the meeting with the residents was it was an unbridled success. It was a very positive meeting. The folks who live there took great pride in that area. It was clean, it was nice. Compared to what it might be if you drove through there today, they could tell that they had guests coming. We were welcomed. I think they would have been within their rights to tell us where to go when we showed up, and to not welcome us, to not invite us out there, but to simply kick us out and, be done with us. And it was quite the opposite. Everyone was, for the most part, polite and respectful, a little off the cuff, perhaps at times, but
Strong emotions involved.
there were some strong emotions, and it could have easily
all
turned
right.
into something quite nasty, and it was not. We were quite welcomed, everyone was listening, everyone was heard. I think it was a great meeting for us to have had.
I agree.
But is there a consensus that this is not going anywhere? Seems to be. Okay.
I think we need to stay on top of the living conditions. and,
Agreed.
Improvements the owner should make to,
Yep.
No, just one thing to add there is Chuck is helping us, or arrange a call with us with, what's the acronym again?
It's the Minnesota Housing and Finance Authority.
Yeah, to see what programs are available, that when we go talk to the owner, we'll say, these programs are available to you to help improve the park. And kind of like what Gene said in the beginning is, maybe try to encourage the current owner to see what improvements he can make, and we can help by seeing what programs are available to him.
Yeah, a lot of the same programs should be available to improve infrastructure, and even they could pursue the housing options.
Yeah. So we'll find out, I think it's end of this week or next week? End of this week. Thursday, right?
So it's a consensus that we're going to stop pursuing the relocation?
Yep.
Okay.
All right, then on to the K-9 program. As everyone knows, Officer Fred resigned and left the department. When he did so, he expressed an interest in purchasing Jerry. The labor negotiations team met and discussed and determined that, based on the full facts of the situation, it was best to sell Jerry to Officer Fred, so that was part of the agreement. It was done. But now that leaves the city without a K-9, without a K-9 handler, but yet still technically a program out there. So what do we want to do with that? And I guess, Chief, the rumor mill is that you may have an update on the future of the program or some interest in an ongoing program.
So I've gone back and forth on the program itself and what we should do. I think this community, especially in light of the amount of narcotics we're finding, is important. What I struggle with at this point is whether or not the cost is there. We are in the current process of hiring another officer. I do know we have an applicant who used to work for another agency that was disbanded. They were a canine handler. They purchased their dog and all of their equipment. I'm not suggesting that we should simply hire that person, but I do think there maybe is some value in waiting to see what the outcome of the process is. A lot of our costs with the canine was initially upfront with squad car, you know, with the squad cars and the training and everything else. And, you know, it is possible if this particular applicant rose to the top. I do believe that part of, you know, wanting to come here would be contingent on, you know, being able to utilize their canine. So I think there's some value in waiting to see what happens. You know, ultimately it'll be up to policies and procedures to decide, you know, who the best applicant is and best fit at that second round of interviews. And if this person is there, it's at least something to think about, as, you know, whether or not that's the direction we want to go. Like I said, I struggle with it. You know, I think there are expectations within the community as a whole that, quite honestly, I'm not sure when it comes to being a handler in a small town and agency like this are necessarily worth it. But I also think the value that the dog, when utilized properly, can bring to the community, it can do a lot of good for our town. So you know, balancing those expectations for a handler who, you know, has to spend a significant amount of time training, they have to spend a significant amount of time, you know, normal patrol work on top of the care of the dog, on top of, you know, getting out and doing the community-based stuff, you know, the public visits and stuff like that. It can get to be taxing. So it's a tough one, but I think it's one to at least maybe sit back and wait and see what happens in our hiring process before we make a final decision on it.
I'm not totally ready to write it off yet. Kind of wait and see too.
I guess I kind of agree with Paul. If you have a applicant that's interested in the K-9 program and he got hired, it would make it simpler to continue. But if we have to go out and look for a K-9 police and base that decision on him being a handler, I'm not sure that's necessary or relevant.
Yeah.
When we look at our budget, dropping the K-9 program would be doing us a favor. And like I believe I said at the council meeting a few weeks or whatever meeting that was, there's a lot of K-9s in the area that we shouldn't be ashamed to ask for help when we need it, because other agencies sure love to ask us for help. Rest my case.
And I don't think I disagree with you on that, Neil. If the particular applicant that I'm aware of were not the one selected, I don't know that I could advocate for maintaining the program. I do have interest. You know, I met with all my staff yesterday. There's been a lot of talk about retention of officers, you know, and what we can do to, you know, keep people here, you know, 5+ years. I have an officer who is interested in it. They're nowhere near ready to be able to take on that responsibility. So there's no way I could advocate and say, yes, we should keep the program, you know, because we're still years down the road before that person would even be ready to take on the responsibility of a K-9. So, you know, I think this is kind of if we have this opportunity, it's a potential good opportunity to continue with our program. If that applicant isn't selected, then I think it's, you know, we have to reassess what we're going to do with the program and potentially move on. Circumstances have changed since we came to this council and asked for the program. When we first did it, there were limited number of dogs in the area. Since that time, we've seen a drastic increase with other agencies, you know, between Stearns County, Cold Spring PD, Avon, Meeker County, and even Candy, Ojai County. So some of the justification for starting the program initially has diminished.
If this applicant were hired, would we have to purchase the dog from them? And if so, any idea what that might cost? I know that would all need to be negotiated.
And here's what I guess I would recommend. If this particular applicant were successful in being the one hired, I would recommend to the council that we sit down and negotiate the terms of the use of the dog. I don't know that we necessarily want to, and I don't know, and Bill, maybe you have some thoughts if I'm not thinking of anything. I don't know how that necessarily works. If the dog is, say, owned by the handler and used by the city, how that plays out. Could it be a contracted service? That I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that.
Something to investigate.
I think it would be a very unique situation. So-
I'm thinking we'd probably have to purchase the K-9. Otherwise, we'd probably end up paying more in contracting for its use to cover liabilities than it would ultimately cost us to just buy outright.
The liabilities are the thing I'm wondering and thinking about as a potential problem is if something happened with the dog, not it were injured, because I think there's ways to protect against that. But if the dog went off the rails and did something, who's liable?
Right.
The handler or the city? It could be something as simple as a contract reading, you are the, owner possession-wise, but the city is accepting the responsibility and the liability for the animal. I don't know. That's probably more of a bill thing. But it's,
We'd want to talk to our insurance company. I mean, the league would be the insurer, so but we'd want to talk to them about that. I'm sure that would be a discussion.
I think with owning the dog, we're just setting ourselves up with what just happened. Is it becomes city property, and then say the applicant decides to leave after 2 or 3 years. Well, they're gonna want to bring the dog with them, and then what?
Well, kind of depends on how old the dog is now.
Well, that too.
No, you said the buyout in advance. If they leave, then
Right.
I think
the
we've,
city becomes whole.
I think we've hopefully learned from the previous situation and can maybe sidestep a few
Right.
in the road.
And all the upfront costs have already been pretty well established, because you still have the vehicle, correct?
we still have the vehicle.
So, being that this would be the second time around, if that person is indeed chosen, at least we have a starting point that's already been established, and where we can go from there. But I just think, in my opinion, with the department having a dog, that those in the area who know that there's a dog available real fast is going to probably knock down some of the deviance that's possible in the area, if you know what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
I have another opinion on that, but
Go ahead.
until the court system penalizes the drug dealings, it's kind of like the DWI guy that ran over the protesters in the city. I don't know how many he had, but it was numerous.
Yeah.
Until
Well, we're
we
all
start-
supposed to play by the same set of rules, but not everyone does it, right, Paul?
Correct.
So the revolving door, no matter how many dogs you got, probably isn't gonna solve the problem.
No, but we do have, I agree with you, you're not gonna solve the drug problem, but you can really diminish, the level in your community. We've seen great success over the years, and yes, it's pushing the problem on somebody else, but showing enough attention to individuals who are dealing drugs and who are doing those things that victimize our citizens, if we show them enough attention, they eventually move. Didn't fix the problem, it pushed it onto a different community, but it did, It did assist our community for a time being until somebody else took their foothold and took over their place. But that's also just kind of the nature of our business, so. And to answer your question about the dog, I believe the dog's only a couple years old, 2-3 years old. So I mean, it's gonna be real similar in age to what Jerry was. So,
And the guy's already trained as a handler, so we don't have any training.
Is the applicant aware that purchase by the city is possible? Do we know that, if she knows that? Or is she expecting to retain possession of the dog? I mean, that may make a difference to the applicant as well, you know? I think it's all kind of up in the air until we know more about that situation.
I was gonna say, that's all stuff for negotiating.
Well, right, so I mean, I don't know, it's so hard to even think about until, I mean, if we don't get any great applicants, and this applicant is great, I don't want to close the book on it,
Yep.
even though I think we're all a little hesitant.
When does your window close?
next Wednesday.
Okay.
So the plan right now is interviews on the 7th, Wednesday the 7th, for the first group. I think we're up to well, I was contacted today on another one, so I know we'll have 5 for sure. I don't know if anything came in today or not. You know, we'll probably have, I would expect we'll be somewhere between 5 and 10 applicants when it's all said and done. So we'll run our first round of interviews on the 7th. The plan will then be for the 21st for policies and procedures. So we would know generally where we're at on the 21st, whether or not that particular applicant is, you know, the one who's there. And what their expectations are, I don't know. They had reached out to me and talked with me about it. And I just told them, I said, apply. We can always have the discussion with the city as to what their wishes are, whether or not they would like to bring the dog in or not. So.
And then it would come down to their choice if we decide not to take the dog, then they could
Yep,
not take the job.
Correct.
sure.
So it's going to policies on the 21st?
That's what I was hoping for. If it doesn't work, then it won't be the 21st, but I'm hoping for the, sometime that week of the, what would that be, the 19th to the 23rd, something like that?
My trial block's the week before, so let's keep it the 21st.
Okay. So shoot for the 21st.
And if I tell you that my trial was canceled, it's because I had a very bad day.
Well, he could have settled, you could have had a good day. So, I mean, that's all I know. I don't, you know, I do think it's worthwhile just holding off and seeing. I mean, we're not out anything. I have talked to some different agencies. There is some interest in the car if we choose not to go that route. Considering you can't even get cars these days,
Yeah.
I'm fairly confident that we'll be able to sell that squad car if we choose not to retain the program and continue it, so.
1040 still has like 4.
This is a Tahoe.
Gross.
So, and I mean, you know, we do have some decent equipment in it, so it would, you know, if we're not gonna retain it as a K-9 squad, there will definitely be an agency out there that's gonna be interested, so.
Okay.
So consensus then, we'll table that one until we get an idea close to the end of July. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
All right.
We're adjourned.